30 years ago in 1989, the Republic of Korea and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations established what's called a sectoral dialogue partnership. And over the next 3 decades, South Korea and the ASEAN region have witnessed an exponential growth in their economic size, their presence in the global political arena, as well as in cultural and social realms. Now, on this televised debate, we'll review the last 30 years of relations and map out the next 30 years moving forward. Coming to you live from the International Media Center of the 2019 ASEAN-Republic of Korea Commemorative Summit, this is Summit 2019, the Super Preview. With the 2019 ASEAN-Republic of Korea Commemorative Summit now less than 24 hours away, I have a wonderful group of panelists here on the stage with me to provide us a better perspective heading into the multilateral summit, which involves all 10 leaders of the ASEAN member states, hosted by President Moon Jae-in. As you saw in the introduction clip, let me work from my very far left, Dr. Jae-hyon. He's one of the most prominent ASEAN researchers here in South Korea. Thanks for joining us. And to my immediate left is Ambassador Im Sung-nam from the mission of the Republic of Korea to the ASEAN. We're delighted to have your first-hand experience as well as your expertise in security and diplomacy.
Thank you.
Now, to my immediate right is Brian CHOW. He's the CEO and founder of the Idea Music Entertainment Group. He's been over a decade, he's been at the forefront of linking and spreading the Korean pop culture in Southeast Asia. And he's also a keynote speaker at the Culture Innovation Summit that's happening tomorrow. And last but not least, to the very far right, Ambassador Hae-moon. He's a former Secretary General of the ASEAN-Korea Center and a 2-time diplomat to Thailand, one of which was as ambassador, South Korean ambassador to the Kingdom of Thailand. Welcome on board. And I'm Connyoung Jennifer Moon, Chief Editor and Anchor at Arirang TV, and it's a privilege to be moderating this session for the next hour. Now, so we're going to get this discussion rolling. Asia's rise has been swift. Home to more than half of the world's population, the region has climbed from a low to middle income status within a single generation. Now, studies show that by 2040, the region will generate more than half of the world GDP and account for nearly 40% of the global consumption. But even within Asia, world powers have been shifting their focus and architecting their strategies toward the ASEAN region. So why ASEAN and why now? I want Ambassador Lim to start us off with, as you have first-hand experience working in the region. Why ASEAN and why now?
Well, as you rightly pointed out, all the economic trends clearly show that ASEAN could be the powerhouse of the future. And if I may add just one more factor, which leads to that kind of conclusion is the demographic characteristic of the people in ASEAN. The average age of the people in ASEAN is 30. They are on average 30 years old, which means they provide the abundant human resources as well as the huge consumer market. So that clearly leads us to believe that ASEAN is the future powerhouse of the global economy. But besides that, even from political and security perspective, ASEAN is becoming a global weight or regional weight, in particular in recent years. In June this year, the ASEAN leaders adopted the AOIP, which is an acronym for ASEAN Outlook on Indo-Pacific. As you might be aware, recently there were so many discussions and controversies surrounding the concept of the Indo-Pacific. And ASEAN has presented its own principles on how to deal with those issues, which are, for instance, ASEAN centrality, openness, transparency, inclusiveness, and respect for international law, and so on and so on. So Korea is on the same page as ASEAN as far as that ASEAN outlook on Indo-Pacific is concerned. So that's just one example how ASEAN is drawing attention from the international community, not just economically, but also politically and security-wise.
Right, and it sounds a lot like the South Korean President Moon Jae-in's new Southern policy. I think there's a lot of convergence there. Ambassador Chung, do you want to add on to that?
Yes, let me add a couple of points to what Ambassador Lim just has described. I think ASEAN has shown a remarkable degree of resilience over the last 5 decades. That may explain why ASEAN continue to elicit the attention and interest of big countries from the world. And also, as you may know, at the end of year 2015, ASEAN has officially launched the ASEAN community. So this ASEAN community has been spearheading the regional integrations in the wider East Asia region. So these 2 points may explain why ASEAN continue to enjoy the attention from around the world. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
So ASEAN is without doubt an impressive region in various aspects, posting an annual growth rate of 5 to 6%. And like you mentioned, Ambassador Lim, it's 600 million plus population. Most of them are under the age of 30 or at 30. Dr. Lee, what would you say is a driving force behind this steady growth by the ASEAN region?
Well, I guess it takes a really long time to summarize all the factors that driving Southeast Asian economy's growth. But I would like to point out 3. First of all, as Ambassador Lim mentioned, the Southeast Asian economies are very young. The average age is under 30, and the Southeast Asian economies are very rich in natural resource. The economies are quite attractive for the international investment. And also, if you look at the geo-economic location of ASEAN countries, this is the located on the passage of international trade, one of the major international trade. So from the outside perspective, it's very attractive as well. But what really drives Southeast Asian economy is foreign direct investment coming from South Korea, China, Japan, as well as Australia, these big countries surrounding Southeast Asia. And what is important about this FDI inflow to Southeast Asia is that the ASEAN economies are quite attractive for the international investment. From the beginning, the ASEAN economies were quite open to the world, the global economic structure, and culturally, the ASEAN countries are very open to the outside. So this openness made ASEAN economies very attractive for the investment.
Right. Not only in its economic size and labor force, Southeast Asia or the ASEAN is very rich in diversity and known for the resilience of the people. Brian, as a Malaysian yourself with a business headquartered in the ASEAN region, would you explain to us the socio-cultural vibrancy of the region?
The growth of social cultural attribute to music ecologies in urban environments, especially the recently few years, the highly expand of the population below 30 years old. So the buying power is keep increasing for ASEAN country. And as you know, for youngster or the urban area population, they are more easier to accept the outside culture and free to accept new culture, in other words, yeah. So this is the best to prove by the expansion of K-pop market share in these 2 years, yeah. So basically, yeah.
So I think the common factor that all the experts on the panel have pointed out is the openness of the ASEAN region. I'd like to address this question to Ambassador Chung. How would you assess the last 30 years of relations between the Republic of Korea and the ASEAN? How does it compare with the ASEAN's relations with other nations?
I think Korea and the ASEAN have developed a wonderful partnership for the last 3 decades, which has truly produced a multifaceted, a multidimensional, and multi-layered relationship between Korea and ASEAN. I think this is something that the world has been inspired to emulate. And in a nutshell, I believe that we have been able to create the image of an exemplar partnership between ASEAN and One Dialogue partners. And as you rightly recognized, the Korea-ASEAN have made remarkable progress within a relatively short period of time, from sectoral dialogue partnership to full dialogue partnership, and also from comprehensive economic partnership to strategic partnership. And in addition to that, Korea is the first ASEAN dialogue partners that has hosted the 3 commemorative summits with ASEAN in its own country. I think this is really, truly phenomenal. And also the new southern policies that has been unveiled by President Moon in year 2017 opens up a new vista for Korea-ASEAN partnership. This policy has been designed to bolster the Korea-ASEAN strategic partnership. And I believe that the policy has already begun to produce some kind of tangible benefit. I think this policy is work in progress. I believe that it will continue to produce the kind of benefit and result the people are eager to see. And in addition, since the year 2011, Korea and the Mekong countries, the sub-region of ASEAN, have been able to officially open up consultative mechanism on the level of foreign ministers. So the foreign ministerial consultation between Korea and the Mekong countries have been going on very, very well. And now that consultation will be ready to be upgraded to the summit levels. Thank you.
Right, so the robust progress made in ASEAN-Republic of Korea relations will definitely be revisited by the leaders when the summit kicks off within hours from now. So the 2019 ASEAN-Republic of Korea Commemorative Summit will serve as an opportunity to, as a highly symbolic event to mark the 30 years of partnership, but will also serve as an opportunity to lay out a new vision for the next 30 years together and shore up ASEAN's support for South Korea's peace drive.
신남방 정책은 대한민국 국가 발전 전략의 핵심입니다.
So the 2019 ASEAN-Republic of Korea Commemorative Summit outperforms the previous two that were held here in this nation and many other multilateral summits in not only in scope but also in the number of related events that covers various topics ranging from business and industries, culture innovation, fashion, startups, beauty, as well as biodiversity and security. So a plethora of topics will be covered throughout these 2 days plus 1 day of the Mekong South Korean summit. Now, all of you on this panel either were directly involved in the architecture of this summit or have been invited as a guest speaker for a key event at the summit. Ambassador Lim, I want to start with you. What are the key agenda that will be discussed by the leaders here in Busan?
Well, in general, there will be two agenda items for the upcoming summit meeting. Number one, they will look back upon the accomplishments made in the ASEAN-Korea relationship over the past 30 years. And then they will chart together the new blueprint for the coming 30 years. And more specifically, they will also have a chance to engage in discussion of the connectivity. Connectivity is a buzzword in ASEAN these days. For instance, ASEAN has produced a paper titled ASEAN Plan on Connectivity 2025, which means by the year 2025, ASEAN plans to improve and increase connectivity among the 10 member states. So there will be discussion about how Korea can be of help in improving the connectivity among ASEAN states. But at the same time, they will also engage in the discussion about how to improve the connectivity between Korea and ASEAN.
So definitely, South Korea may be looking forward to projects in the ASEAN market in infrastructure, transportation, and whatnot, as well as new industries involving the fourth industrial revolution. Ambassador Chung, do you want to weigh in on this? What kind of agenda do you believe that the leaders will discuss during the summit?
In addition to what Ambassador Lim has spelled out just now, I think the agenda will reflect the three dimensions of Korea-ASEAN partnership, together with the new Southern Policy Vision and the ASEAN Community Vision 2025. Specifically, the leaders will deal with issues pertaining to political security area, as well as economic area, and finally, social cultural area. These three areas are closely connected to the three pillars of ASEAN communities.
Right, and Brian, I mean, we will be getting to the importance of soft power as that can't be overlooked, but what kind of agenda do you bring to the summit? What will you be talking about at the Culture Innovation Summit tomorrow?
Cultural content export has now been the most innovative and driving force behind the ASEAN country. Yeah. My agenda will be highlight how does this soft power influence the market, especially at the cultural K-pop market. Yeah. And I will share on this how to make the live performance more innovative, yeah, in the culture sense. Yeah.
Now, as a sense of uncertainty prevails across the world economy with growing protectionism and trade conflicts, as in the ones seen between the US and China, many countries are left in a position to rethink their economic strategies. Some observers have noted that Vietnam and other Southeast Asian nations will be the biggest beneficiaries from this US-China trade war. But on the ASEAN-Republic of Korea front, we've been seeing exponential growth in trade volume between the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea, and South Korea's trade surplus with Southeast Asian nations topped $40 billion last year. Of course, to enhance cooperation and continue these kind of growth and amongst the two, both the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea should enjoy the benefits from these. What does the future hold for the ASEAN Republic of Korea economic cooperation and business ties, Ambassador Chung?
Well, I think the future holds both promise and challenge. Depending upon how smart and innovative we are, we can make the future more bright than ever. I think specifically, we need to create some institutions that can benefit, that can continue to support on the economic growth. Firstly, I think there has been discussion going on how to strike bilateral FTAs among some of the ASEAN member countries, beginning with Indonesia and Malaysia and the Philippines. And also we need to think about how to upgrade or how to further liberalize the ASEAN-Korea FTA, which have been already come into force. And also, we need to talk more about how to create the job opportunities among Korean citizens and ASEAN citizens. One of the best way might be to enhance cooperation between Korea and ASEAN in the area of smart city construction. That cooperation will create a huge, amount of job opportunities. And also, I believe that we need to think about how to further liberalize the air skies agreement between Korea and ASEAN. And also, we need to talk about how to build, the ecosystem for startups between Korea and ASEAN. And also, we need to talk about how to deepen and expand the regional value chains for our businesses, including small and medium-sized enterprises. I think this may include some of the suggestions I wanted to make in order to make sure that the result will be felt by the people, on the street. Thank you.
Now, Dr. Lee, do you want to weigh in on that?
Oh, yeah, of course. Given the track record of Korea-ASEAN trade growth and investment growth, I believe the trade and investment between the two parties will grow further in the coming years. But there's one condition for this. Trade and investment is done by private companies, private firms, and these private firms work for their own profit. So for South Korea and Southeast Asia, they have to remain economically attractive to each other. That's one thing. And the second, of course, the economic cooperation between Korea and Southeast Asia is looking at kind of new frontiers like 5G cooperation, the smarter city, and these are the new territories of economic cooperation. And the private companies have some kind of risk in investing in these new frontiers. So for the government has to give some kind of a guarantee for the private companies to adventure in these new territories. And the last, but this is quite important, there's a trade imbalance between Korea and ASEAN. South Korea is having kind of $40 billion US dollars trade surplus every year. And we have to work together to reduce this trade imbalance. And of course, South Korean government is emphasizing Korea's contribution in terms of ODA, and the Korean government is also the emphasizing corporate social responsibility if South Korea companies invest in Southeast Asian countries. But definitely we have to work for that goal, reducing the imbalance.
Well, let me address this question to Brian. Brian, you're a businessman doing business in Southeast Asia, in the ASEAN region. Have you felt the two-way business pick up in resilience in recent years? I mean, what's the business environment like for a business person like yourself doing business from the ASEAN with the Republic of Korea?
For the past few years, the business tie between ASEAN and Republic of Korea has grown to a higher degree. especially from the cultural exchange and the export. As my perspective view, K-pop culture has positively influenced their homeland as well as ASEAN. The index show out of 100% watching the K-pop video, 89 of them are outside South Korea. That means the impact is very, very strong outside Korea. We are under a good ecosystem now in this business environment, as Korea constantly gain ground in cultural-driven and make inroad into a content-based economy. So ASEAN will be benefit from there. Yeah.
Now, Ambassador Lim, can we anticipate a joint response by the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea to counter the rise of global protectionism at the conclusion of the summit?
Well, free trade has been the backbone of rapid economic growth both in Korea and ASEAN. And I'm sure the leaders, 11 leaders, 10 leaders from ASEAN and President Moon will engage in discussion about how to encounter the trends of rising protectionism in recent months and years. And at the end of the day, they'll adopt two important documents. One is called the Joint Vision Statement, and the other is Co-Chairs Statement. I'm sure through those statements, the leaders will make reference to the importance of free trade and their common position, hopefully to oppose any forms of protectionism.
Well, speaking of free trade, the ASEAN summit in Bangkok in early November drew global spotlight for the leaders' announcement of substantial progress in the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP. Now, RCEP will include the 10 members of the ASEAN members, as well as 5 Asia-Pacific nations, namely the Republic of Korea, Japan, China, Australia, and New Zealand. Now, although for now it looks like India will not be on board, the official signing of RCEP next year will see the emergence of the largest trading bloc in the world, accounting for 40% of global trade and about a third of the world GDP. What are the anticipated effects of RCEP when it takes effect, and how will it fare without a huge member, India, on board? Ambassador Chung.
Well, I believe RCEP will serve as an anchor for an open, stable, inclusive, and rules-based regional trade architecture at the time of uncertainties in the global economic environment. I think this RCEP will also contribute to expand and deepen the regional value chains for enterprises, including small and micro and medium-sized enterprises. I also believe RCEP will significantly boost the regional future growth prospect. And also, it will contribute to growing, the economic growth rate in the global economy. So overall, I believe that the conclusion of RCEP negotiations by the 15 participating countries out of 16 may send a very positive signal to the market. So the world is being urged again to further liberalize the trade rather than try to retract the free trade. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Lee, so how will RCEP fare without a huge member, India, on board?
Of course, the India not signing the RCEP is quite a big loss, but India still has a chance to sign that agreement by next year. So let's our fingers keep crossed. And what is more, without India, RCEP is still meaningful. As Ambassador Chung mentioned, the regional small and medium economies are facing huge pressure coming from China-US trade war. and the unilateral behavior by the superpowers. So this kind of a multilateral economic cooperation or regional free trade agreement is quite crucial to provide some safety net for regional economies. And on top of that, at the moment, the multilateral cooperation in this part of the world is getting weaker and weaker. So taking this chance of signing RCEP, we can work toward strengthening regional multilateral cooperation. So it's still quite meaningful.
Well, just a few months into his presidency in November 2017, South Korean President Moon Jae-in identified the Republic of Korean relations with the ASEAN as one of his administration's top priorities. Now, under the banner of the New Southern Policy, as some of our experts have already mentioned, of course, South Korea is not alone in setting its eyes on the ASEAN region. And with that, with the rise of the New Southern Policy, more businesses, including new industries linked to the Fourth Industrial Revolution, have been tapping into the ASEAN market. Brian, in your view, what are some key factors that these companies must consider in order to make a successful landing, soft landing in the ASEAN market?
ASEAN has great prospect given its huge combined market, especially the fast growing of young generation of population. But company could really realize on three factors based on the localization, core value, and value added. But I would like to emphasize on the localization. Yeah, because I saw a lot of company fail because they never put attention into this localization. Because ASEAN country, they have a multicultural background and a very unique cultural background. So if we want to do business there, we need to respect their culture and then adapt to the culture. So this is very important, yeah. And the other thing I need to emphasize is the value added. Yeah, you need to bring some new system, new know-how, or new technologies into ASEAN. They have the market, but you need to put some value added item in. Yeah, systemization, synchronization is the topic. Yeah, thank you.
And what's also very much worth noting is the spread of soft power and exchanges between the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea. Korean pop culture is huge in the ASEAN, right, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah. And, but we're also seeing a growing number of Southeast Asians joining Korean boy bands and girl groups and making debuts here in the Republic of Korea. As of 2018, the number of South Koreans who have visited the ASEAN topped 11 million, and roughly 600,000 Southeast Asian nationals are currently living in the Republic of Korea. Brian, based on your firsthand experience, what's your assessment of the growth potential in cultural exchanges that includes pop cultural exchanges between the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea?
The K-pop industry experienced a significant growth last year, which now South Korea is ranking number 6 in the top 10 of music worldwide. Yeah, so this is a very significant achievement. And with this significant achievement, we'll definitely open up more market share at ASEAN country. Yeah.
Well, all of these agenda will definitely be discussed in the next 3 days with symmetry rich in symbolism, but hopefully with leaving behind a practical outcome for not only the people, prosperity, as well as peace. Well, not only the ASEAN region, the favorite tourist destination for South Koreans, the region it's also the second largest export destination. ASEAN has emerged as one of the key major partners of the Republic of Korea in recent years. Now, all 10 members have deep ties with both South and North Korea, and they've pledged full support for South Korea's drive for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Then we saw Singapore and Vietnam host the historic two summits between the U.S. and China. Ambassador Lim, now during the high-level strategic talks dialogue last month, both the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea noted ASEAN's willingness to play a more active role as a broker between North Korea and the rest of the world and for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Now, how realistically speaking, how much can the ASEAN do as a broker, as a stabilizing mediator in the North Korea denuclearization process?
Well, as you might be aware, right now the ball is in the court between Pyongyang and Washington. And without kind of the breakthrough between the DPRK and the US, it may not be difficult. It may be difficult for ASEAN to play any kind of tangible role in the way you just described. But still, ASEAN has made meaningful contributions for the peace process on the Korean Peninsula. As we all know, ASEAN hosted two summit meetings between the DPRK and the US, respectively in Singapore and then in Hanoi. And ASEAN provides a platform called ASEAN Regional Forum, or ARF, where North Korea is also a member. And as you rightly pointed out, all the 10 member states of ASEAN have diplomatic ties with Pyongyang. So when ASEAN talks to the DPRK, we believe that Pyongyang will listen more carefully, more attentively, and ASEAN has always been a constant source of support for the peace process, for the need to engage Pyongyang in the dialogue. So all these successes, all these gestures made by ASEAN will continue, hopefully, be made in the years to come. And maybe at one point, when there is certain positive progress in the US DPRK track, ASEAN might be able to play certain tangible, certain concrete roles so that the two Koreas could be brought closer and the North Korean government could make a more meaningful decision for the peace and security on the Korean Peninsula as well.
Now, Ambassador Chung, if we remember, it was actually the Indonesian president, President Joko Widodo, who first suggested the idea of inviting North Korean Chairman Kim Jong-un to this summit. And also, they're very keen on actively playing a role in mediating between North Korea and the rest of the world. Why do you believe that is so, and how do you think the ASEAN can contribute more actively in the Korean Peninsula peace process?
Well, as Ambassador Rim rightly said, I think ASEAN still can play a very important role, even if ASEAN is not a direct party, a party directly concerned with the negotiation for North Korea's nuclear issues. But nevertheless, ASEAN can play a very, very positive role in terms of fostering an international environment, or international atmosphere conducive to the resumption of the negotiations between North Korea and the United States. And furthermore, I think some member countries of ASEAN have unique experience in terms of making a successful transition from centrally planned economic system to a market-based economy. So those experiences accumulated by some of the ASEAN member countries, beginning with Vietnam, could be extremely relevant and helpful once and when DPRK decides to abandon their nuclear weapons forever and then undertake opening and reforming of their economy. I think that is something very precious that ASEAN will be ready to share with DPRK once DPRK will be ready.
Now, in an op-ed to the Asian News Network last week, President Moon Jae-in said he'll discuss peace on the Korean Peninsula during this ASEAN-Republic of Korea Commemorative Summit with the leaders of the ASEAN. Ambassador Lim, what's due on the agenda, and will the leaders of the 10 members and Republic of Korea be able to come up with something substantial, a substantial outcome at the conclusion of this summit?
I'm sure the peace and security issues on the Korean Peninsula will be high on the agenda at the commemorative summit meeting. I cannot predict exactly how they will be engaging in the discussion, but maybe they may not be able to talk about two specific ideas. But overall, I do hope that the ASEAN leaders will have a chance to listen to President Moon from our president directly regarding the three principles related with the peace and security on the Korean Peninsula. Principle number 1, zero tolerance for war. Principle number 2, mutual security guarantee. And principle number 3, co-prosperity. And I hope and expect that the ASEAN leaders will be able to welcome and support the important principles laid by the Korean government in addressing the peace and security issues on the Korean Peninsula. It may not be too concrete, it may not be too specific, but that will provide the platform on which the ASEAN member states and Korea can engage in further discussion about how ASEAN can make more meaningful contributions in the months to come, in the years to come, to improve the security situation and to bring about permanent peace on the Korean Peninsula.
Now, Dr. Lee, do you think that the leaders of the 10 members of the ASEAN and the Republic of Korea will be able to come up with something different that we've seen, a distinguished outcome on this very issue at the conclusion of the summit?
Well, I'm not quite sure because sorry. Unlike Ambassador Lim, I'm just a simple researcher on the Southeast Asian international relations. But I hope the leaders could come up with some kind of consensus regarding the ASEAN's role in the diplomatic effort to bring the North Korea to the bring out North Korea to the international community. If you can remember, the President Moon Jae-in last year in Singapore lecture, he mentioned Southeast Asian countries' potential role in bringing the North Korea to the international community. Actually, the regional multilateral cooperation like ASEAN Plus 3, East Asia Summit, ASEAN Regional Forum, all are managed by ASEAN countries. So the ASEAN's role is quite important. Just imagine if North Korea opens up, and if North Korea denuclearized, then North Korea wants to come out to the international community and becoming a normal diplomatic country. Then ASEAN's role is quite important, making North Korea as a part of East Asia Summit, ASEAN Plus 3, and all this kind of regional cooperation framework. So I hope the leaders, both from Korea and Southeast Asia, would make a consensus that the ASEAN's role is quite important in bringing North Korea out.
Well, still a bit ambiguous, but we'll see in the months and years to come how ASEAN can play a role in North Korean denuclearization process. Now, in other areas, joint efforts to tackle non-traditional security threats, such as in areas of counterterrorism, cybersecurity, transnational crime, maritime cooperation, they're also expected to top the discussions table during the next 3 days. How will both sides benefit from this cooperation? I want to begin with you, Ambassador Chung.
Well, let me begin by warning how serious or devastating the non-traditional security threat could be if we fail to address properly the threat. I think the specter of non-traditional security threat is ominous and formidable. The physical damage and human casualties inflicted by non-traditional security challenge could be by far more serious and devastating than those caused by conventional security challenges. You may have witnessed the magnitude or scale of the destruction of communities struck by recent natural disasters in Southeast Asia. In some cases, cyber attacks could undermine or paralyze the functions of sovereign state government. I think Korea and ASEAN can benefit a lot from close cooperation in this area. As a matter of fact, Korea and ASEAN have been working closely together, both bilaterally and through the ARF and the ADMM Plus mechanisms to deal with non-traditional security threat. I believe this issue has gained an urgency recently. That may explain why the leaders of Korea and ASEAN agreed to put it on the agenda for discussions. As a follow-up, the two sides will engage in a vigorous manner to address the threats from the non-traditional arenas. Thank you.
Ambassador Lim, so what exactly are we talking about when we say joint efforts to tackle these non-traditional security threats?
Well, to make a long story short, non-traditional security threats do not differentiate national borders. So if there is a terrorist attack, if there is an attack related with the cybersecurity, if there is a threat of extremism, there is no differentiation about why country A should be a target and why country B should not be a target. So there is a strong need for closer cooperation between Korea and many other countries in the region, of course, including ASEAN. And that's why we will be launching the first ministerial meeting on transnational crimes between Korea and ASEAN immediately after the commemorative summit meeting to be held tomorrow.
Really, as much as I'd love to continue this panel well into the evening and until the leaders gather for the commemorative summit, which kicks off tomorrow, I should probably wrap up and let our busy panelists go. So we're going to be closing out, but I'd like to ask you, any of you, if there are anything you want to add, key takeaways that you want to weigh in on before we wrap up.
May I?
Sure, go ahead, please.
I might repeat what was said by Brian, but many people in Korea, many companies in Korea are interested in doing business with ASEAN, in particular against the backdrop of the New Sudan policy, with all the support from the government. But before you do business, maybe the thing you might want to do in advance is to become friends. And to become friends, you should be able to put yourself in the shoes of the others. As emphasized by Brian, the respect for local culture, local practice should be the first step when you go into ASEAN market, so that we first become true friends before doing business. And that's why the New Southern policy emphasizes among three elements of people, prosperity, and peace, the people always comes first.
Dr. Lee, key takeaways from today.
Let me add a little bit on the social-cultural exchange between Korea and ASEAN countries. At the moment, there is an imbalance in cultural exchange between Korea and Southeast Asia. The Korean culture goes to Southeast Asia, and it is enjoyed by Southeast Asian people, but we in South Korea don't know much about Southeast Asian culture. There should be a balance in cultural exchange between South Korea and ASEAN countries. If we want a Korean wave sustainable in Southeast Asia, this balance should be met.
Ambassador Chung.
Yes, I think we have witnessed a very strong foundation for mutually beneficial partnership between Korea and ASEAN for the last 3 decades. I believe that this summit, together with the summit between Korea and the Mekong leaders, will be an occasion to further solidify the mutually beneficial partnership between Korea and ASEAN, whereby the people will really feel the benefit of the partnership between Korea and ASEAN. As a matter of fact, Korea has been pursuing people-centered community of peace and prosperity. Likewise, ASEAN has been promoting people-centered communities, people-oriented communities. So we have a lot of commonalities in the two approaches. So I really hope that through this summit and the related activities, the people of Korea and ASEAN really feel the benefit of this truly wonderful, marvelous partnership.
Brian?
I just disclosed another statistic. Out of the top 10 K-pop consumer market, top 10 K-pop consumer country, 5 of them are from ASEAN. Yeah. So this is very interesting figures.
So which only solidifies the grounds that the spread of K-pop is very strong across the ASEAN nations, and like Dr. Lee mentioned, it should be reciprocal relations between the two. So South Korea, the Republic of Korea, perhaps should be more open to Southeast Asian culture as well. Well, that just about brings us to the end of the 2019 ASEAN-Republic of Korea Commemorative Summit, the Super Preview. The summit will serve as an opportunity to review the last 30 years of partnership between the two, but more importantly, serve as an opportunity to lay out a blueprint for the next 30 years moving forward together. Now, we close out with this single called Side by Side. It's produced by a Korean composer, Kim Hyung-suk, featuring artists from all 10 ASEAN member states and the Republic of Korea. A big thank you to each and every one of you panelists. You've been wonderful. Thank you for making this panel very rich and resourceful. And a big thank you to our viewers for staying all throughout. Thank you and bye-bye.
나는 아세안의 무한한 잠재력과 하나된 힘을 믿습니다. 또한 사람 중심의 평화와 번영의 공동체를 아세안과 함께 만들겠다는 확고한 비전을 가지고 있습니다.
Smart Biz Accelerators has contributed to the introduction and expansion of a smart factory system, which has emerged as a core industrial area of the future. This week on Smart Biz Accelerators, we explore Lee Bae-chen, a small but competitive business in the field of range hood. Next One, a developer of products that combine glass and nanotechnologies. And Baron T&B, a provider of nutritious beverages with improved taste. Be sure to tune in and join us.
Mythical bath.
Oh, it's huge. Look at this.
Oh,
Wow.
fantastic.
Oh. Wow. And it's really beautiful. Like,
Yeah, it's very,
and
very
it's like-
pretty. It's starting to rain. That is the magic of Jeju Island.